Good morning, I'm Joyce. I'm going to be leading our class this morning. Thank you all for coming out on this beautiful spring day. Isn't this weather great? If only all of our whole spring could be like this. Obviously, we're going to be talking about fruit trees. How many of you are familiar with Marshall grain? Who's been here before? Okay, so are you a first time? Well, welcome. What's your name? Hi, Leanne. Welcome here. So I'm going to be talking about how to plant and care for your trees and using organic methods. Basically, there are several factors which are outlined on your handout here, this general fruit tree care guide that I put together for you. And so the most important thing to start with is, what do you like to eat? Because obviously you don't want to have a fruit tree that you're not going to eat the fruit unless you're feeding someone else, or like the squirrels. So anyway, there are a number of fruit trees that do well in Texas, and we're going to obviously focus on those because you're going to have a lot of trouble if you try to struggle with a tree that's not adapted to our climate, especially since you're going to be planting this in, outdoors. There are some citrus trees and whatnot that you can grow inside, and we will touch on that. But mostly I'm going to be talking about ones that you're going to be planting outdoors in your landscape. And there's a lot of great reasons to have fruit trees. Maybe some of you can tell me, besides eating the fruit, is there any other reason you have for wanting to have a fruit tree? Decorative, yep. Pollinators, yep. Those are all great reasons. One thing you want to think about before you plant the tree is, what is the mature size of the tree going to be? Because that's going to affect your entire landscape. Because as it grows, it's going to cast shade, it's going to spread out and stick its branches out in all different directions. And if there are things obstructing it, if there are things obstructing the root development, all of those are going to affect the tree. So you want to make sure when you plant it that you're taking into account all of those kinds of things and giving the tree the room that it needs to really do its thing and get as big as it can get and produce the fruit that you want. One of the nice things though about fruit trees is that they generally don't get really big. Pecan trees do, but that's a nut tree, not a fruit tree. Fruit trees generally only get to be about 15 to 20 feet at the most, and then they'll top out. They're going to be probably equally wide in the landscape. So you want a circular area that's going to be about 20 feet in diameter for that tree, and that includes the roots. So the top of the tree generally mirrors the roots of the tree. So if the tree is going to be 20 feet across, your roots are going to spread out, almost that far. So you want to, again, make sure that you have a spot where you don't have obstructions for the roots and stuff. All of your fruit trees are going to need at least 6 full hours of sun every day to produce fruit. So again, if they're being shaded by another tree or something like that, or somebody's house roof line, you're not going to get the full benefit out of the tree. You may or may not, depending on how much light it is getting. The tree may still continue to grow, but it might not produce fruit, or it might not produce as much fruit, whatever. But so if you're giving it that full 6 hours or more, then you're going to get maximum production out of it. If it's getting too little light, then it's really not going to do much of anything, and eventually it's just going to die. Another thing to think about is how many chilling hours your plant needs. And this is true for a lot of a lot of landscape plants, like your bulbs, any kind of like tulips and irises and things like that, as well as fruiting trees and so forth. Even a lot of your perennials, they need to go through a cold period in order to produce fruit the following spring. And so in North Texas, we generally get about 600 to 800 hours, or we get 800 chilling hours, so 800 to 900. So you need a fruit tree that doesn't need 1,000 hours. Okay, so because a lot of your fruit trees do need 1,000 hours of chilling time. So the varieties that we sell here are, because they are for North Texas, we've chosen them because we know that they can get by on only 800 chilling hours. So, people will come in and say, well, I really want this variety of apple tree. Well, if you lived in Washington State, you could grow that kind of apple tree. But you're not going to grow it here. At least it's not going to be very successful. So that's why I handed out the list of best and worst varieties of trees for our area, just so that you know it's not comprehensive. There are other varieties that may do well here, but that's something to consider when you're picking out a tree is whether it's really going to grow here or not. And then we talked about pollination. Some trees need a friend in order to pollinate properly. Most fruit trees are self-pollinating, but they will do better if they have a friend. You'll just get more bees, more cross-pollination between the varieties. It doesn't matter if you have two of exactly the same variety, you can have two different varieties. Only exception would be like apple trees, you need to have two of the same kind. But with peaches and pears and plums, figs, it doesn't matter. As long as you have two, you're going to get pretty good fruit production. And yes, ma'am. That's still going to help you bring in more pollinators, but yeah, ideally you want to have two of the same cultivar. So, two peach trees, two apples, two pears. But yeah, anything that you do to bring in more pollinators is going to be beneficial and help with the cross-pollination of because even within a tree, it's one tree, the bees aren't necessarily going to hit every single flower every time, and the flowers don't all bloom at the same time. So just generally, the more pollinators you have, the better. Yes, that is very beneficial. I had in California, I had an apple tree. I only had one, but there were a number of other people in my neighborhood that had apple trees. And so I was able to get the cross-pollination that you need. So you might want to talk to your neighbors and find out what they've got in their yards before you pick a tree. And then when you go to plant your tree, you're going to want to plant it in the native soil. It's usually best to do that rather than trying to amend the soil and then amend the planting hole and load it with a bunch of compost and all of that. You want the tree to become adapted to the native soil, because even if you amend that planting hole, eventually the roots are going to want to go out beyond that. And if you amend that planting hole, what they'll tend to do is they're like, well, that's crappy clay soil over there. I don't want to be over there. I'm going to stay in the planting hole. And then you have a really tight root ball, and you don't have the root structure you need to support the canopy of the tree. So you want those roots to spread out. So you're actually better off you can amend it, but you want to make sure that you amend beyond the root ball of the tree. And then if you have clay soil, chop it up with your shovel or something like that, to make passageways for the roots to expand out into the native soil. But I would say just go ahead and plant it in your clay soil or whatever you have. Does anybody not have clay soil here? Okay, yeah, that's mostly what we have. And then when you make your planting hole, you want to make it just slightly bigger than the pot it comes in. So you don't want to make a great big huge hole and then backfill it in. You want to make a small one. One of the most important things, pick this up so I can hopefully show it to you better. You'll notice that all trees have what's called a root flare at the bottom, where it starts to widen out, it comes straight down, and then it kind of slopes outward away from the trunk of the tree. And it's kind of small on a baby tree, but as the tree gets older, that's going to become more pronounced. So if you look at an older tree, it's a little easier to see what I'm talking about. But it's really important that when you plant your tree that you do not cover that part of the trunk of the tree. You never want to have dirt or mulch or any other kind of soil material around the actual trunk of the tree, because that will actually cause the bark to rot, and that will kill your tree very quickly. It'll start to turn black and the bark will come off and the tree will actually rot. And I had a great picture for my slide presentation, which I'm not doing today, but I have some pictures here if you want to look at them of how not to plant and how to plant, and what happens to a tree if you don't follow my directions. It will literally break off and fall over. And I can show you a picture of a tree that happened with here if you want to come and look at that afterwards. So that is, those are the fundamental things that you need to think about before you plant. And again, then after you plant, you do want to mulch around the base of the tree, but you don't ever want to come up to you don't ever want that material to actually touch the trunk. So you always want to leave what they call some people call it, plant it like a donut or a bagel versus a volcano. So don't ever come up like that around the tree. You want to leave about 6 inches space from the base of the trunk out to where the mulch starts. So and then from there you can go out and mulch the ground around it. But mulching is going to help the tree. It's going to insulate the roots, and it's going to help retain moisture. So mulching does some nice things. It's also going to help with weed control. So there's a lot of good reasons to mulch after you plant your tree. And then after you get it planted, you're going to have to water it in. Now, another thing to do when you're planting is anytime you plant anything and you excavate a hole and then you backfill it in, it's gonna be a little fluffier than when you started. And so when you go to water it, it's going to compress down. And so when you plant your tree, you want to actually put it in a little bit high so that when you water it in and it settles down, you're still going to have that root flare showing. It doesn't have to be exact, but you want to make sure that that you don't end up with a concaved area around the base of the tree where water can collect. You want that to be raised up a little bit so that when it settles, it's level. We recommend when we plant trees for people, which we do, in case you didn't know that, we do organic maintenance and landscaping for a lot of our customers. And when we plant a tree for people, we use this product here as a root stimulator and immune system builder. This is a product, Green Tree Elixir, that's made by a local arborist here in Grapevine. He does a lot of work for the city of Grapevine, I know, and he does a lot of work for our customers because we don't have an arborist on staff, so if somebody needs an arborist, he's the one that we recommend. He makes this himself. It's his own recipe, and you want to use this like once a year. You know, you'd use it at planting time, and then you'd fertilize again in the early spring with it. It's a concentrate, so you'd mix this with water, and then it tells you how much to make based on the circumference of the trunk. So a little tiny tree like this isn't, you know, maybe a gallon of water is probably enough. But as the tree gets bigger, you're going to want to use a larger amount. But this is really great stuff. A similar product that we carry is the Howard Garrett's Garrett Juice Tree Tonic. He's also a certified arborist, and he makes this recipe himself. It's basically got, let's see, he's got humic acid, liquid seaweed, apple cider vinegar, molasses, and some miscellaneous micronutrients, beneficial bacteria, stuff like that. And that's another product you can use, and you'd use it the same way. Yes, ma'am. It wouldn't hurt to do that. Yeah, I'm a proponent of using, you know, different things each time, just so that you can build up that biodiversity in your soil. Since we're talking about doing it just once a year, I don't know how much difference it makes, but you know, doing it that far apart, but it certainly wouldn't hurt. But yes, if the tree is under any kind of a stress, this is a go-to product to try to relieve that stress and restore it to health, and that's a big reason why we sell it for. So yeah. You want to get your tree established. It's going to take about 3 years for a fruit tree to become fully established, really any kind of a tree, because their roots are so extensive, and you really need to make sure that they're getting plenty of deep watering. If you look at your handout on watering, the worst thing you can do, especially with a tree, is to use sprinklers. Because what happens is, and this is actually true even for your lawn, if you lightly water the top of your soil rather than watering all the way down to the base of the tree roots, or even to your lawn roots, what happens is the roots come up to get to the water, and then you're training them to stay up by lightly watering like that. So it's much better, even with your lawn, to water less often but more deeply, so that the roots have to go downward to keep getting to the water. As the water soaks in, it's going to pull the roots downward, and that will give you much better root structure. I've done away with sprinkler watering. I don't, unless my lawn is, you know, in the heat of the summer, my lawn is really thirsty, I'll turn on the sprinklers manually, but I water almost everything by hand, because, or use a soaker hose or something like that for your tree. One thing you can use, you bring the gator bag out. One way to make sure that your tree is getting watered deeply is to use what's called a gator bag. And this is basically a canvas type of thing that you wrap around the tree, and you put the water inside the bag, and it gradually leaks out into the soil. And so it'll keep on watering your tree, you know, so you don't have to stand there with the hose, but it'll keep watering your tree for like several days, depending on how hot it is and how dry the soil's gotten and stuff like that. But that's really another important thing with trees, especially anything that's deep rooted. The deeper the roots, the deeper you need that water to go to get to them. Another thing you can do is, got this guy here. I also have the root feeder, which you can use to put the green tree elixir in. Either one of these. This is just for fertilization, but this you can use for either fertilization or for watering. And you put your fertilizer in here, and then it has this has a hose end for it to water the roots. But this one actually goes into the soil and has holes in the bottom so that the water can seep out into the ground below the top of the soil level. So these come in different lengths depending on how big your tree is. You can just dig a hole for this, put it deep down in the soil, and then this comes off and you can put stuff down in here. So you can put just plain water, you can put fertilizer, you can put soil drench of any kind in there, and it gets the material down deep into the ground. So that's kind of a handy thing to have. So anyway, watering, especially the first 3 years, getting your tree established is really, really important to make sure that you're getting that water down deep. You're going to water probably, you want it to get down about 3 feet, really, about 3 feet down. You know, if you're using a soaker hose or whatever, you just need to keep on putting water on it until you can check, you know, by making a hole in the soil to see how deep the wet part is. That's one way to do it. Moisture meters are usually made more for container plants or house plants. They're not long enough to go deep down to give you a true reading. So I wouldn't try to use something like that. It's better to use your finger, you know, make a hole and then stick your finger down in there to see how far down it's wet. But you're going to want to keep doing that basically about once a month to make sure that your tree's getting enough water for at least the first 2 to 3 growing seasons. And then in the summer, you may need to water more then, especially the first year. You may need to water more, like in, you know, when we get to 110 degrees in August, you know, once a month watering your tree may not be enough. So you want to keep it moist but not soggy. And I know that can be hard to figure out, but if you put down about 1 inch of water a week, once a week, water deeply, get it down to that 1 inch level, and then that'll soak down and get down to the root level and keep everything moist. And then make sure you water slowly. You don't want to, you know, do the fire hose thing. You know, you want it to like drip and, you know, so that it's really soaking in. You're not just spraying stuff around. And water all the way out to the drip line of the tree. The drip line is like I said, the roots kind of mirror the canopy of the tree. So the drip line on this is only going to be the width of this pot. Okay, but as the tree gets bigger, the drip line is going to get wider and wider. So whenever you fertilize or water, you want to water that whole drip line area all the way out to that edge. When the tree goes dormant, you can back off on watering. In Texas, we often still need to water in the winter because we can go for quite a while without any kind of rain or anything. And by the way, you want to count rainfall when you're watering your tree. So if we get a rainstorm and you get 6 inches of rain at your house, you can skip that week, And try not to get the water on the trunk. Same reason you don't want to have mulch around the trunk, getting the bark wet. I know, when it rains, the bark gets wet. I don't know why. Trees are okay with that and not with your watering hose, but that's how it is. But when the tree goes dormant, and all of your fruit trees are going to go dormant in the wintertime. So like usually around November, you've harvested your fruit. It's starting to get cold. The leaves are going to drop. And that means the tree is going dormant. And so during the dormant months, like November, December, January, you can reduce your watering to once every 4 to 6 weeks, doing that 1 inch of water on top of the soil. And that will be enough for it, because it's so much cooler. The water doesn't evaporate as fast. That's one reason. And so, and then if you're watering slowly and deeply, it'll stay moist down there for quite a while in the cooler weather. And then fertilization you want to do just while the tree is active. You don't need to fertilize, but as it starts to leaf out in the spring, that's when you want to start fertilizing again. And that's when you can do your green tree elixir. We do have some specialty fertilizers if you've got a citrus, which I'll talk a little bit more about container plants in a minute. But for container plants, you'd want to do more frequent fertilization anyway, because of being in that container. They can't, they're going to go through, the nutrients are going to wash through the container faster and all of that. So you need to fertilize more often. But in the ground, fertilize regularly during the growing season. You can stop fertilizing in the summer when it gets hot, because the tree is going to produce, it's going to flower in the spring. And then, in the summertime, apples usually you harvest in the fall, but with peach trees and plums and most of the fruit trees that we grow here, they're going to be done producing fruit by July anyway, so you don't need to fertilize after that. You just want to fertilize while they're producing their flowers and their fruits, and then you can stop until, like I said, and then it'll go dormant, and then you can wait till the next spring to start up again. And usually you don't want your tree to fruit the first 2 to 3 years because it's so small. You want it to put all of its energy into producing the roots and building up its strength, building up stronger branches and things like that to hold the fruit. And so usually if it does fruit, it's best if you just pick those off and not allow the tree to fruit and let it divert that energy into the roots and everything. When you do start producing fruit, usually you have to thin it out, because you'll get clumps. You'll get like 3 or 4 coming off one stem, at a branching point, and that's just too much weight. It'll pull the branch down like that, and it can potentially break it. So you don't want that, and you'll actually get bigger fruit and juicier fruit if you thin your tree. So you want to have like some spacing between each piece of fruit. So like this one, if you had, this is still little, so you wouldn't want to have more than 2 pieces of fruit on this branch anyway, because it's a small branch. So if you had one here and one here, that would probably be okay. If you had one out here on the end, that would not be good, because again, it's going to pull it down. You don't want it to have to, bend like that. And that's going to deform the shape of the tree too, because it's going to train it to, like this one here is kind of deformed, and that one really should be pruned off because it's growing downward, and you don't want that. You always want the tree to grow up like that. And so thinning out the fruit is gonna help prevent, branching problems later on. Yes, ma'am. Like I said, you just wanna, there's no rules about it. It's just, like I said, you don't want, it depends on how big the branch is, how much fruit it can support. But if you space them out, if you have a clump of fruit, they're gonna restrict each other's growth. And that's why, too, if you thin them out, they have, each piece of fruit can expand more to make a bigger, like I said, you're really just making space. So it doesn't really matter as long as they have space to expand to their full mature size. And then, like I said, it's going to be better for the tree, and it's going to be better for you because you're going to get, instead of a bunch of little things that aren't very juicy and are all stone in the middle and no fruit, you want to have a nice big juicy one, so that's what you're going for there. The last thing as far as maintenance goes is just trying to keep weeds and grasses and stuff from growing under your trees. A lot of people want to have grass growing under their trees. It's really not good for the tree because, again, that watering is a problem because you can't water your lawn the same way you water the tree. And then the tree, anything that's growing under your tree is going to potentially steal nutrients from the tree. So your lawn, any shrubs in that drip line area are going to steal from the tree. And so you want to try to keep it free of grass and weeds and stuff like that. So you just need to get out there once in a while and, pull your weeds or spray them with vinegar or whatever you've got to get rid of those. The next section is just about what kinds of problems you're likely to run into and what to do about those. Some people like to spray their trees with horticultural oil in the spring as a preventative for a lot of pests. Like, it will prevent a lot of worms and caterpillars from getting into your fruit later on if you treat the tree with horticultural oil. I would use this one here myself because the horticultural oil is actually, if I'm not mistaken, where do you put it here? Mineral oil, which is, it is okay to use in an organic program, but most horticultural oils, and I'm going to have to open this up to make sure this one is, are mineral oil, which is actually made from petroleum. But anyway, this is pollinator safe. When the tree is dormant, that's not really a big issue. But if you need to spray the tree while it's flowering, then this would be the thing to use rather than the horticultural oil. This I would only use while the tree is dormant as a preventative, and you only need to use it like once every 3 to 6 years. So you don't need to spray it every year anyway. Just once in a while, if you are starting to have problems with worms in your fruit and stuff like that, then the next spring or the next dormant season you might want to spray so that the following spring you don't have those issues. But another way that you can prevent insects, caterpillars, from getting into your fruit is to use beneficial insects like trichogramma wasps. That's what they're best at, is finding those caterpillars and laying their, parasitizing them by laying their eggs on the caterpillar and the babies consume the caterpillar as food. And so it's a very natural process. Ladybugs are another way to do it. They'll go after, ladybugs will eat almost anything. The trichogramma wasps only attack caterpillars. And they're also a useful pollinator. The adult wasp is what they call an incidental pollinator. It doesn't actively collect pollen like a honeybee does, but as it crawls around on the plant looking for food, it's going to inadvertently move pollen around as well. And so it's called an inadvertent pollinator. But anyway, if you are going to spray your tree, it's best to do it in the very early morning. The tree is going to absorb it better, for one thing. They're more receptive. They're in the cool morning air. Their pores are just, if you want to think of it that way, our skin, our pores can expand and contract a little bit. Trees are kind of the same way. They're more receptive, more able to soak up a foliar spray in the early morning hours between 3 and 6 a.m. So if you're going to spray, that's the best time to do it. And then another thing to note is to never use copper sulfate on your fruit trees, because that can actually turn the fruit toxic. So you don't want to use a copper product on your trees. That's another reason why I would recommend this instead. This is basically, it's neem oil and sesame oil. Actually, there's not neem oil. It's sesame oil and fish oil and a surfactant, potassium sorbate. So it's consumable. It's safe for us to eat. So that would be a good alternative. When to spray if you have stone fruits like apricots, peaches, or nectarines, the best time to spray would be now, after the last frost. So these are just haven't formed fruit yet. You want to try to get the spray on the tree before the fruit forms, because the caterpillars get inside that little tiny fruit, and then they just live in there until they're ready to come out again. So you want to spray early. You may not get anything this year because of our multiple freezes that we had. I know some trees had already blossomed, and then we got a freeze, and then it warmed up, and then we got another freeze. You want to do it when it's budding, basically, while it's still budding, but not until after March 17th, because that's when our last frost usually is. With plums, those you want to spray in the winter when the tree is dormant. And then you may need to do a second one in the summertime. But so the timing on those are a little bit different. Fruit trees don't really have a lot of problems. If you get varieties that are suited for our climate, you're going to have fewer problems with insects and diseases. Anyway, but they generally, like peaches, the big problem with peaches is either the caterpillars getting in the fruit, or what they call leaf curl, which is a fungal problem. And either one can be treated with the same product, because this will treat for fungus as well. But you have to spray early and treat it early, because once it's got it, you can't really do anything until the next year. So you'll still get fruit. I had a peach tree, and of course this was California, but my peach tree, if I forgot to spray it in time, it would get the leaf curl almost in, if I didn't spray it, it would get it. but I would still get fruit off of it, you know. It just wasn't quite as healthy as it might have been. So maybe I would have gotten more fruit, you know, whatever, but it's not going to kill the tree. It's just going to basically make the tree look bad, because the leaves are all going to be kind of weird looking. And then if you do get anything like that, try to, you know, if you do get any kind of fungus, or if you get apple trees are prone to blight, and the blight is actually one of the worst things. Peaches and plums and other stone fruits generally don't have issues with fire blight, but apple trees are very prone to it, even the ones that grow in our area. So if you get fire blight, I didn't bring it out here, but it's a powder, and it's streptomycin. Fire blight is a bacteria, not a fungus. So you can't use a fungicide to kill fire blight. You have to use the streptomycin. And but when you do, if you do have any kind of problems like that, you want to get the disease part off the plant. You always want to do that. Anytime any plant gets any kind of disease on it, whether it's powdery mildew or you know, something like that, you want to clean off any of the infected material. If the like if your roses have black spot and it's dropping the black spotted leaves on the ground around the rose bush, you want to rake those up and get that material out of there, because that's just going to keep on infecting the soil, and the plant is just going to keep getting reinfected. So you want to clean off any kind of dead material from the tree itself. If you have to prune a branch to clip off, you know, if you've got dead material here, or infected material, you know, cut it off here and just get rid of the dead stuff. Don't put it in your compost pile. Don't ever do that. Just put it in the trash, and just get rid of it as much of it as you can, and then treat the remaining tree with whatever you need to treat it with. And as far as pruning, you'll notice that, like for example, every tree has what's called a leader branch. The leader branch basically is the one that goes straight up into the air. The other branches are going to go off to the sides. So this would be the leader branch on this tree. This would be the leader branch on this tree. You never want to prune the leader branch. Never want to cut that off. You would never cut it here. Okay? You could cut this. You can cut this. You know, you can cut this, but you don't want to cut this up here. Pruning, and usually there's no reason to prune it unless it's dying or something like that, but it shouldn't be. If that part's dying, then your tree has a bigger problem, you know. Fire blight would probably be the biggest thing that would cause something like that. Yeah, you never want to cut that one. A lot of times what people do is cut straight across too, and that's another thing you don't want to do. You never want to cut horizontally. You always want to cut at a 45-degree angle. And whichever angle you cut, that's the way the branch is going to continue to grow. So if I cut, let's see, if I cut this one and I cut it this way, it's going to grow that way. And you may want it to do that. Sometimes that's how, when they're like when they get those vertical plants, like cypress and junipers, to grow in a spiral stuff like that. They want to keep it really close in. That's what they do. That's how they train it, is they cut it this way so that it grows that way, and then on this side you'd cut it this way so that it'd grow that way, and that would keep everything growing up toward the center. Whereas if you cut it this way, it's going to grow in the direction of my finger. So, and you always want to clip it just above one of these little nodes where things are starting to come out. As close to that as you can get. And I like to just take my pruning tool and just kind of rest it gently on this little nub right here. And that will actually give me the right angle that I want for that 45 degrees. And then I just clip it right there. If you clip it in between one of those, then what's going to happen, for example, I've got one here and one here. If I clip it in between, then this, whatever part is left above this one, is going to die anyway. And then that's going to invite in pests and diseases, because that's going to die and it's going to rot and, you know, stuff, and then that's going to attract bugs to get in there. And then that can end up harming the rest of your tree later. So you always want to do an angled cut, and you want it to be as smooth as possible. You want to do a nice, clean, sharp cut. You don't want anything jagged. So even if you have to try again and cut a little bit lower down to get that nice, clean cut, go ahead and do that, because you never want to leave that damaged material there. And then if you do have something like fire blight or even a fungus on your tree, it's a good idea when you're pruning it off to sterilize your pruning tool between each cut. Because if you've got you know, fire blight over here and you cut here and then you come over here and cut here, you just infected this side of the tree. You can use bleach, just regular bleach. You can use isopropyl alcohol. It's a little bit safer than bleach. But you want to, you know, make sure if you're using like alcohol, you can just dunk it in, you know, a cup of liquid or something like that in between each cut, and clean it off. Same with the bleach, you know, dilute it in water and then just dip your pruning tool in the liquid to sterilize it before you go to the next cut. I talked already about fire blight. Most of your other problems, disease problems, are going to be fungal. And for that, you can use neem oil or triple action or the Be Safe. Any one of those would work for your fungal diseases. Usually with organic products, they don't persist as long as a chemical would, so you need to spray more often. So usually it's about every 10 to 14 days until you get the problem fully under control again. And then, pears are another one that can get fire blight. And what happens with fire blight is it'll turn black. The branch will start to turn black, and that's a good sign that you have it. If you're not sure, bring us pictures. We love pictures. So if you have any kind of a problem and you're not sure what it is, take lots of pictures and bring those into us, and we'll help you figure it out. And then with the insects, like I said, the horticultural oil is a great preventative. This will kill a lot of insects, your trichogramma wasps, your ladybugs. Those kinds of things can all work for you. If you get something like tent caterpillars, usually it's best to just break open the bag and feed the caterpillars to the birds. Get rid of it that way. That's about it for my presentation. Does anybody have any other questions for That's true. Critters are a big problem with ripe fruit, yes. And there are some things you can do to try to scare them away and whatnot, but squirrels and birds are very persistent creatures, and really, you know, other than just getting out there and harvesting it, there's not a lot you can do. You can put netting over your tree to keep the birds out, which we do. I don't think I have it in stock right now, but we do carry that. But then that makes it hard for you too to get to the fruit. So, you know, then you have to figure out how to get the netting off again to get to the fruit. And if you cut a hole in the netting, then there goes your netting. Putting a bag over your, like the nets that they put avocados in and stuff like that. Yeah, you could try that, but yeah, squirrels can chew through anything. But then you have to, I mean, if you have a good sized peach tree, you're gonna have 100, 200 peaches. You know, so covering every single piece of fruit individually is, you know, is probably not realistic. If you had, you know, like a bunch of grapes, you know, or a watermelon, you know, yeah, you could do that. But a fruit tree, that's probably not really practical. The netting might be better. Some people take strips of metal, aluminum, and the light catches it and the wind blows it, and that will deter them, at least for a while, until they figure out that it's not harmful to them. Some people even take old CDs and like, you know, use a twist tie and hang some of those on your tree, and it works the same way as the aluminum strips. You know, it catches the light and it reflects the light, and they don't like the flashing sensation that they get from that. So you can do that kind of thing. The problem is that they're not as dumb as we think they are, and they figure out that it's, you know, it's just a light and it's not going to hurt them. Some people also put out like we have fake owls, plastic owls that you can mount on a fence or something like that. You know, again, it's the kind of thing that works great for a while until they figure out the owl never moves. So unless you have a real owl, or you know, sometimes dogs and cats will help you, you know, especially cats, because they'll jump up in the tree and try to chase them away and stuff. But I don't know, my cats get into these games with the squirrels where, you know, the squirrel will come out to the middle of the lawn and go ning, 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 and the cat will run over there, and then it'll zip up the tree and hop the fence, and, you know, they think it's a fun game, you know. So they're just, it's life in the, you know, life in the organic garden. Unless you want to get a, you know, a pellet gun or something and shoot them, that's you know, and then if you shoot out somebody's window, you know, that's not good. So it's usually best to just get out there and harvest them as soon as you can. But yeah, they get to it right before you do. It's like they know she's gonna harvest today. So okay. All right, well, thank you so much for coming out today. I really appreciate it.